In other breaking news, Senator Ted Cruz of Texas chaired an important hearing on the violent rioters plaguing liberal-run cities for decades all across the country. Portland, Oregon, for example. For weeks, we have seen unhinged agitators attacking law enforcement, destroying the federal courthouse, unleashing a wave of destruction coast to coast. Here's Senator Cruz from earlier today.
Denying fair protection of law enforcement is a civil rights violation. Those rioters aren't concerned about racial justice. Indeed, they're willing to make a mockery of the peaceful protests to advance their violent objectives. More and more, we're seeing signs that a significant portion of this violence, of this rioting, is not random, it's not spontaneous. Rather, it is coordinated and inspired by leftist, anarchist groups like Antifa. We're seeing too many local officials, mayors and governors, who've made a cynical decision that it's in their partisan interest to turn a blind eye to this violence. I would also note that the ranking member said nobody is condoning the violence and rioting, and yet nowhere in the opening remarks was even one word condemning it.
Senator, welcome back to the program. I want to read something else you said today, and I'm going to get to that comment in a second. You said, First Amendment, you're a constitutional scholar. Alan Dershowitz of Harvard, you went there, said one of the best students he's ever had and one of the best debaters. You said the First Amendment guarantees freedom of speech, the right for people to peacefully assemble, but peacefully assembling matters a great deal in that protection, and peaceful protesters must be protected. Riots must be stopped. They're not stopping it, Senator.
Not only are they not stopping it, they're facilitating it. Look, at the end of the day, this isn't complicated. The First Amendment protects our right to speak. Every one of us has a right to speak. We have a right to protest. What the text of the First Amendment provides is it protects our right peaceably to assemble and to petition the government for redress of our grievances. What's happening, unfortunately, it is not free speech, and those who are peaceably protesting are seeing their protests hijacked by violent anarchists, by Marxists who are engaged in acts of terror. At the end of the day, none of this is complicated. Don't assault your fellow citizens. Don't firebomb a police car. Don't loot and destroy small businesses. Don't murder police officers. And Sean, I got to tell you, it was striking in about 4 hours of a hearing today in the Senate Constitution Subcommittee that I chair. 7 Democrats spoke and questioned the witnesses. Not a single one dared to criticize Antifa in any way, because they're making a cynical decision that they want to encourage these radical leftists who are assaulting and threatening American citizens. It's really unfortunate.
Let me go to that point you made and what we just played and what you just said, the cynical decision that it's in their partisan interest to turn a blind eye to violence and then you went on to say to throw out terms like stormtroopers, Gestapo to describe federal law enforcement. Let me put on the screen the comments of Nancy Pelosi. She compared our federal law enforcement to stormtroopers. And now let me play Senator Clyburn. First, he made a Nazi comparison. Then later, then he compared the president to a fascist, a Mussolini. And then Jerry Nadler says it's a myth. This is violence that we see with our own eyes isn't happening. Let me play that for you.
And this president and this attorney general seem to be doing everything they possibly can to impose Gestapo activities in local communities. And that is what I have been warning about for a long time.
There's violence across the whole country. Do you disavow the violence from Antifa? That's happening in Portland right now? There's riots.
That's a myth that's being spread only in Washington, D.C.
About Antifa in Portland?
Yes.
Sir, there's videos everywhere online. There's fires and riots. They're throwing fireworks at federal officers. DHS is there. Look online. It gets crazy, Mr. Nadler.
Senator, when Joe Biden has to take on Bernie's agenda and AOC's agenda and go radical hard left, that to me is a sign of weakness. I'll give you another sign of weakness. When people start using Nazi and fascist analogies, I think that's weakness too, and denying what our own eyes show us. That is just bizarre.
Yeah. Look, the hateful rhetoric on the Democratic side, and they've really unleashed the crazies in their party, and most of the party is really held captive to the extreme angry voices, whether it's Antifa, whether it is AOC or Bernie Sanders or Elizabeth Warren. And you see them denying reality. You also see them using rhetoric, I mean, calling federal police officers stormtroopers like Nancy Pelosi did, or Gestapo as Clyburn did. I mean, calling cops are not Nazis, and it is grotesque, it is offensive, and I challenged every Democrat in that hearing. Do any one of you apologize to the police officers that your party is calling Nazis? Not a one of them. And you know, you played Jerry Nadler saying it's a myth, it doesn't exist. We heard testimony from my longtime friend Ken Cuccinelli, the acting Deputy Secretary of Homeland Security. Sean, do you know how many injuries there have been to federal police officers in the last 6 months just in Portland?
Well, I know overall around the country recently in the last few weeks, 2,000 and some 14 killed.
Just in Portland, 277 injuries. We're talking throwing pipes. We're talking throwing rocks. We're talking throwing frozen water bottles. We're talking hitting a federal officer in the head with a sledgehammer. We're talking using commercial-grade lasers to blind the officers. And by the way, it's interesting. Ken brought one of the commercial-grade lasers. I have to admit, I looked at that claim, and I kind of thought that was overwrought. I sort of thought of like the laser pointer that like you play with a cat with. And I thought, okay, come on, what's the big deal?
No, it's
interesting. Ken took the laser and just pointed it at my hand before the hearing. For literally 1 second on your hand, you go, ow, crap, and it burns your hand. I mean, it is, you will not keep your hand there for more than a second. It'll burn it. They're pointing it at their eyes. They've had over 30 injuries and a risk of permanent blinding. That's what these terrorists are doing. And the Democrats not only are refusing to admit it, but they're ordering police officers not to protect them. As you know, I introduced legislation called the Reclaim Act that says if you're injured, if your home or business is burned or destroyed as a result of rioting, and the local officials have denied you police protection, have ordered the police to stand down, you have a federal cause of action. You can sue the city or the municipality. You can get triple damages because what they're doing, it's a denial of basic civil rights.
Well, you raised such a good point. I've always argued that sanctuary cities and states, Senator, that these politicians are aiding and abetting lawbreaking.
Yep.
I would say if you refuse as a politician to enforce the law and restore law and order and allow anarchy, is that aiding and abetting when people get hurt and killed?
It is. Let me say a final thing because I hear the music playing. Congrats on debuting #1 on Amazon, Live Free or Die. Very strong. All your viewers are buying your book already, but if you haven't done it, go buy Sean's book. It's very strong. Congrats. That's a big deal.
Senator, in 91 days, I really worry for our nation.
Yes.
If this lawless party at this point gets in office, it's kind of scary. All right,
Stakes
Senator,
have never been higher.
Thank you, Senator.